Popping everybody, it's your boy. We're kicking it on lunch, chopping it up about some New York Jets stuff. It's actually a really good day in Las Vegas right now, so I'm extremely happy. I might end up, we'll probably try to keep this about 40 minutes or so. I want to be able to kind of move around outside for a bit, get out the office, but we're chatting New York Jets stuff, yo. I wanted to talk Super Bowl contention, but the stuff happening with Woody Johnson is actually fairly interesting to me as well. So, for those that aren't 100% familiar with what's kind of been, I guess the theories going around, why the trade is taking so long, right? There's been a lot of contradicting information back and forth for one, so it's hard to really keep up with everything. But the most recent I guess, theory about this whole Aaron Rodgers trade is the fact that Woody Johnson, who kind of seems like he backed ourselves into a corner. I've touched on this a couple of times before, right? I think Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh were set on Derek Carr. Not only is he a great short-term option, he can grow within the offense. You would have had long-term security instead of having to potentially turn the keys back over to Zach Wilson, who, if you have high hopes for, great. Um, but he's not. You don't even have confidence in him as a backup option right now, right? When you want to talk about our backup quarterback situation and Robert Saleh gifting him that number 2 job, it's a little bit concerning. Hey, what's the good, my man? Just chilling on lunch, yo. So yeah, you don't have a whole lot of confidence in the current quarterback room, right? Tim Boyle coming in doesn't move the needle whatsoever. He's literally just a guy that can be a coach on the field for the players. Since he already knows the scheme, he spent 2 years with Nathaniel Hackett. So there's not really a whole lot to that storyline there. Behind him, you have Chris Streveler, and he had the preseason comeback games. During the season, I was high on him from what I seen during the preseason. But then when he got his chance to actually replace Zach Wilson, there were a lot of red flags and different things. Did he move the offense? Yes. Did he have success within the offense and was able to run the scheme? Yes. But then the one play that sticks in my mind is there was a throw to, and I want to say it was Tyler Conklin, that potentially could have went for like 60 yards, maybe a touchdown, but he didn't have the arm strength, or maybe he just didn't have a great throw. And he ended up having to, come back and fall flat for it. Still a completion, but, could have been a much bigger play. So definitely very limited in terms of what his ceiling is going to be, right? Derek Carr would have remedied a lot of that. Now, having Aaron Rodgers definitely takes the offense to a new ceiling. But still, a lot of concerns there as well, right? His notoriety for, being hard on his wide receivers, I've kind of relaxed on that standpoint to a certain degree. But you are talking about a young, impressionable team, especially our wide receiver room. You have Denzel Mims, who's already shown mentally he's a little weaker. He can tend to let some things get to him. I would like to say last year showed a lot of leaps and bounds about him maturing in that aspect. So hopefully that continues to be the case if he continues to make it on the roster. Corey Davis is a veteran, so he's been there and done that. Garrett Wilson, though, he kind of has that alpha mentality. So I would have some concerns there that maybe, they rub, each other the wrong way, or at least he doesn't receive Aaron Rodgers in the right manner, I guess would probably be the best way to put it. And, I, I could see him counting down the days until he, a year or two from now, where he can, depend on a new quarterback, whether that's Zach Wilson, who knows, whether that ends up, maybe we take a flyer on a guy like Caleb Mays or Drake May if we want to try to move up next year. Joe, Jets have only drafted 7 starters. Or excuse me, Jets only have 7 drafted starters. They aren't competing for a Super Bowl. Yeah, yeah. I'll jump into that in a minute. We're just kind of chatting random stuff about the Woody Johnson situation right now. But I I got you. It's going to be an interesting conversation, no doubt. So in terms of the whole Woody Johnson thing, though, not to dwell on it too long, the fact that he's getting cold feet now, I think, is just a symptom of what we've seen repeatedly from Woody Johnson in the past. Knee-jerk reactions to a lot of what the public is saying. He's not a guy that strikes me as having a lot of strong convictions in what his thought process, I guess, is what you can say. And from a business perspective, it somewhat makes sense, right? You have a pool of, um, what do they call them? Like board directors or whatever the case is. But he generally in his role has guys that he relies on to be the experts on what they're doing. Whereas in the football world, he hasn't necessarily allowed that to happen. He's kind of jumped in at certain points due to pressure from the media, which, again, from a business perspective, as well as the fans, from a business perspective, that makes a ton of sense, right? If your product isn't doing well, you go based on what the consumer feedback is. The football world doesn't necessarily work in that same manner. Otherwise, we get a bunch of Madden general managers that are running our New York Jets team, and I think that would scare the hell out of all of us. But Joe, as far as the topic of this conversation, you make a very good point. We've only have 7 drafted starters. I believe you had a comment before too, because this has kind of been touched on a little bit before, where you were talking about how, like, I think you were talking about like the construction of how a lot of these Super Bowl teams have been built before. You don't like the fact that we're bringing in Aaron Rodgers, if I remember correctly, either. You would rather have seen us continue to build via the draft, whether we pick somebody up as a new quarterback or maybe surround Zach Wilson with as many more options as we can. Which I'm totally not against whatsoever. Again, I think in the right now, Aaron Rodgers is going to give us the best chance to win. And I think this is all being pulled by Woody Johnson again, not to tie that back in. But obviously, what are we going on? 3 years of Joe Douglas with the draft class. This will be Robert Saleh's third. He's had 2 years with very minimal successes. He's gone from 2 to 4 to 7 wins. He's been in the bottom of the basement of the NFL sellers for quite a while. And now that he's finally sniffing some chance of success, he wants to take any and every opportunity to make that happen. So it makes a ton of sense to me for why we're making the move. The fact that he's getting cold feet, though, I think can hurt us from this whole leverage conversation standpoint. I think that we have been in the driver's seat for quite some time now. But if you start kind of backpedaling on what you guys already had in place, I think a lot of the earlier reports start to make a lot of sense. The trades that, the trade agreement, whatever the the trade package was going to be, I think it probably was settled. Maybe it was the 2 second round picks this year and next year. And then maybe some variation, right? We're talking about 2025 draft compensation, kickback, stuff like that. Maybe there was a first offered there previously, which if that's the case, and all of a sudden he's pulling back and now Joe Douglas is only offering the 2 second rounders, I could see the Packers, kind of turning into sharks and almost feeling like they smell blood in the water, because why the sudden change, right? And who knows how long, if this offer ever truly changed ago it was, because the Pat McAfee show was almost a month ago, I want to say now. So if this is recent that they've changed up the offer, I think that is extremely bad news on our end. 12 drafted starters, 3 drafted starters playing on a contract on all the majority of the Super Bowl winners. Jets have 7 and 0. Wait, what did I miss there? Okay, so 7 drafted players. Oh, okay, 0 Super Bowls. I'm gonna guess that's what you were referring to with the second number. I don't know. I from what I recall from our last conversation, I think I ended up kind of I want to say I like defaulted to not necessarily disagreeing with your point, but there's a lot of different ways to kind of construct a roster and get to that way, right? The Bengals, and we talked about this on the Jets Flight Squad podcast, they're very much so a different roster as well. When you want to talk about everybody saying you need to build in the trenches, their defensive line is probably above average compared to most teams. But then you take a look at that offensive line, Zach Wilson getting crushed. Excuse me, Joe Burrow getting crushed, 50 plus times a season, and them still not being able to find a way to help them out, and them more so relying on the weapons and Joe Burrow's escapability. Not a great long term plan, but you've seen things work in that way. So that, I mean, not I can't disargue your point. Building through the draft is the whole crux of what Joe Douglas is about. But I do believe there are going to be times like we're seeing right now where you can kind of get away from that plan a little bit. And in my opinion, the best news about this whole situation is that we're doing it in a way that's not mortgaging the entire future, like we've seen from teams like the Rams, like we've seen from teams like the Vikings that have to go out there and try to keep or pick up key free agents every single time. So I'm not concerned about it so much. We're still talking about, even if a trade takes place, we have 5 or 6 picks off the top of my head before any trade back opportunities come up. So we still have the potential to, go out there and try to find these guys in the draft that are going to help us contribute to a Super Bowl without saying, all right, in 2 years, we're completely screwed. So I think it's definitely a lot different. Tampa had 20 returning starters, right? Yeah. Tampa already had a Super Bowl roster in place, though. This kind of reminds me a lot of like what I just discussed with the Ndamukong Suh situation earlier today. To his point, the Buccaneers were a lot different, a much more different team than the Jets when you want to talk about just inserting a quarterback that you think is going to get you to the Super Bowl. I agree with them quite a bit. The Buccaneers had a lot of functional pieces in place built through the draft that they were able to go out there and develop, and then they just needed a quarterback to put them over the top after moving on from Jameis. Tom Brady ended up being that guy. The Rams, they went about their stuff a lot different, though. I don't think there's a strong comparison there. They went out and signed a ton of people. I wonder, like, what did they average in the draft? Maybe like 4 picks the last couple years each draft. They don't have a ton of options to go out there and restock things. And then I'm pretty sure they're looking at like the fourth round or later. Um, Once again, so they went all in. It was definitely a Super Bowl or nothing option for them for whatever this window. We'll see if they're trying to, re-up again, I guess. Um, but they're different. I think the Buccaneers one is probably the closest relation into what we're doing, but we'll see. I mean, I think that Aaron Rodgers pushes us into a different stratosphere. I want to say we're fifth right now. The fifth best odds to win the Super Bowl. We have the third best odds to win the AFC, and then we are second in our own division to the Bills. So I guess if we want to base it around that, I think the Dolphins are probably a stronger matchup, right? Tua, doesn't have the best health situation, so maybe they're factoring a lot of that into the equation. Josh Allen, though, is coming up on injuries recently, too, though. They're going to have a lot of tough cap decisions to make. Their roster, as we know it right now, isn't going to be intact for a while, but at least for this next coming year, there's still going to be a problem. So to me, it's still Patrick Mahomes in the AFC, and then it's everybody else. He just seems to be able to manufacture things that should not realistically be able to happen, right? Plus, he took that crazy contract, which looks like an absolute steal for the Chiefs right now. 500 million sounds great on paper, and then you realize it was only like 155 million guaranteed. And then, of course, he has all these other incentives and workout bonuses and all this other stuff to make sure he's not just SOL in the future. But it's crazy what it's crazy what Andy's been able to go over there and accomplish. Rams have signed free agents 2 years prior, 19 returning starters. But we're talking about 19 starters in terms of all these people that they picked up over the last 2 years, right? Who do they have on their roster? Matthew Stafford, who they traded for. Um, Cam Akers in the backfield. I don't even remember who else they had running the ball back there. I want to say Melvin Gordon, but I feel like I'm way off on that. They had OBJ. He leaves. Van Jefferson. What Tyler Higbee, a tight end. A lot of their team was Tyler Higbee, Van Cooper Cup. Oh yeah, well, yeah, that's different. If you win a Super Bowl, I'm I'm going to try to run it back with my same team as well. I got you. I got you. I got you. Yeah, that makes 100% sense. We're not in the same area though, so we have a lot more experimentation we can do with our roster. Should have been a playoff team, you know, fine. You can make that argument. I think a lot of people do. They rely on the if we're healthy, if we don't have the freak tackle injury incidents, then yeah, we're taking a look at probably being a fringe playoff team or, the fifth, sixth seed, something like that. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Again, not to necessarily disagree with your point, but all I'm saying is at the way that our team is built right now, we haven't sacrificed the future for anything, even including trying to bring on Aaron Rodgers. We have an extremely high cap number next year, as we talked about before we even have any of the TV deals and all that stuff that are going to come through and kick in to help boost that number a bit. So we have an extremely high cap number next year. Again, we'll probably need to fit Aaron Rodgers and stuff in there, but it's definitely manageable. So a high cap number, a young roster that you can still experiment quite a bit. Um, you have some pretty key veterans in place. DJ Reed. I wouldn't count Whitehead, but you bring in Dwayne Brown to kind of help out things on the offensive line. I do like the Quentin Jefferson signing. CJ Mosley is probably going to finish his contract the way we keep shifting money around. So it's not a lot of things that are locked in stone for us, which is why I do think in this particular draft, we should be looking for the players with the most upside we can possibly get our hands on, right? Broderick Jones at 13, for example. I like the Sidney Brown kid out of Illinois at safety in the second round. If he ends up lasting that long after his freaky combine, I don't think safety is one of those positions where they're necessarily saying this guy needs to have all the on-field skills. They'll definitely rely on physical potential and then try to teach them, as he's kind of mentioned before. Um, so yeah, it'll be fun, I think, to kind of I don't I don't know. The drafts that Joe Douglas has had, I don't think you can draw any conclusive, here's how his mind operates, here's what you can expect to do with what he's done, right? Mekhi Becton being his first pick over a guy like Tristan Wirfs, for example. He went for the moon. That kind of ended up burning him, which I think is, you can say more was a character issue or a maturity issue with Mekhi Becton earlier on than it was like an organizational fault. But then you have, the history of them not necessarily, and, Robert Saleh included, prioritizing cornerbacks extremely high. They go out there and they pick Sauce Gardner, um, you know, Zach Wilson. That whole situation still kind of throws me for a loop because we had all those reports saying that, we had I want to say they included Joe Douglas, but basically certain people within the front office were extremely high on Zach Wilson, thought he was even better than Trevor Lawrence, at least in terms of his upside. And then you had guys that didn't think he was worth the number 2 pick. And they still end up going with him, right? Over guys that are more qualified in terms of what they've been able to do historically, Justin Fields. So yeah, I don't know. I wish I could really pinpoint what he do. I'm really still hoping we get a trade down scenario because the more picks in this particular draft, the better. I don't think you find a blue chip guy right out of the gate, but you do have the opportunity to go and get guys that could blossom into some of the best in the NFL in a couple of years, at least in my opinion. What do you got? So if they sign Bates, McGovern, and Lazard, they drafted Schmidt, Carter, Brissett, and Hooker. They are a playoff team with $100 million in cap space. If they sign Jesse Bates, we knew they weren't gonna maybe okay, so that's one of the trends I guess you could say. Joe Douglas hasn't had an affinity for paying safeties whatsoever, right? So would I have loved to have Jesse Bates? Of course. Of course. I think he changes the game for us. The same thoughts I had about a guy like Chauncey Gardner Johnson. I think they're still in two different lanes in terms of production and skill set. But Chauncey Gardner still proved that he could be a turnover machine, which I think is 100% what we need on this defense. So I would have loved Bates. McGovern is definitely a cheap option, so I like that you threw in there that if we drafted Schmidt, we'd be good. But in the same token, the way I view Schmidt and the way I've seen a lot of draft analysts talk about him, if we draft him, he should be plug and play, right? This way, it makes a whole lot more sense that you rely on guys like Tristan Colon and Wes Schweitzer as guys that have that guard center versatility. JMS should be a plug and play guy, which means you don't need to waste money signing Connor McGovern. You don't need to waste money, trying to go after Ben Jones, for example. So I wouldn't sign McGovern, which, to your point, would give us, I guess, not more cap relief because we're looking at what we're looking at now, but we wouldn't have to waste the cap space there. Lazard, it's really whatever to me. I've talked about this before. I don't see him being an upgrade over Corey Davis. If anything, it's kind of a lateral move, and you're betting on, upside a sixth year with Aaron Rodgers. That whole kind of situation. Jalen Carter, we've talked about again on the Jets flight squad. I would not want to see that man on this roster with some of the things that have been going on since he's announced that he wants to be in the draft. From a personality standpoint, he concerns me a lot. I think he's somewhere in the range of Ndamukong Suh, actually, not in terms of dirty play style, but kind of like this aggressive, like wild mentality. And then a guy like what's the name that I mentioned? Damn, it'll come back to me. Why can't I remember his name? Yeah, I don't know. It'll come back to me. But basically, I think he's definitely an outlier personality wise. Skill set. Oh man, I would love to see us be able to pick him up at 13. A huge steal. I've seen him decimate double teams on tape with ease. It's not even like he's out hustling or out efforting people, but yeah, he's different. He's different. I would definitely love to have him. I like Brissett more. I also wouldn't like Kalijah Cansey. I think he fits the one gap penetration we like. I just think Brissett offers us a little bit more versatility with being able to find the optimal matchups when we roll out our defensive line because we'd have a few different guys that can do inside and out. Michael Clemens, you would add in Brissett there. You'd be able to rotate Bryce Huff, Jermaine Johnson out on the edges. I think it would be a pretty smart addition, but he has the injury concerns as well. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of players in this particular class that kind of has some red flags. Hooker, I wouldn't. Hooker's weird, and his draft stock is very weird. Physical tool set wise, he's probably just behind. Actually, I'm not sure where I would put him at. Anthony Richardson is definitely leading the class. He'd probably be behind. I want to say he'd probably be behind CJ Stroud. Richardson, Stroud, Hooker, and then Bryce Young when you talk about like physical traits. But when you talk about like that Tennessee offense that he was in, that absolutely doesn't fit anything the NFL does whatsoever. I don't think Nathaniel Hackett is in the Greg Roman spear of things where he would change his entire offensive philosophy to cater to his quarterback. Or at least not one that you're strongly picking and saying, like we would have done with Zach Wilson, this guy's the future. If Hendon Hooker's there on like day 3, I would say take a shot. Um, Older guy, but like mentally and everything, I think he has everything in place. He just really needs the repetition and the coaching. So I like him as a prospect, but I don't want to have anything to do with him in like the first 2 days. But yeah, if we can find him in day 3, he's like one of the only quarterbacks I would say is worth gambling on because again, in 2 years, when you're talking about trying to keep your playoff Super Bowl window open and you have to go back and revisit the Zach Wilson conversation, he can't be the guy that's an undisputed starter once again. So having a guy like Hendon Hooker that can develop for the year or two alongside Zach Wilson, I think gives you a pretty strong competition at the very least. And if you still don't like what's seeing, then yeah, take a look at the free agency pool or the draft and what I think maybe Arch. I think the Manning kid could come out in 2 or 3 years, right? So at least gives you a pretty good contingency plan. McGovern sliced the guard. Next year, cut Tomlinson. I don't think we can cut Tomlinson next year. We restructured his contract, so I think his cap number blew up again for the 2024 season. Um, I don't even think McGovern would necessarily be a better guard option. Well, maybe. A lot of his issues were in being able to get the line, structured right and kind of get the pass protection calls and the run blocking lanes figured out correctly. Obviously, a lot of rotation on the offensive line and stuff he had to deal with. A lot of quarterbacks coming in and out. So maybe it would be an upgrade from the standpoint he wouldn't be taking on so much responsibility, be able to just go out there and kind of, attempt to dominate. But he doesn't strike me as a very good guard. If anything, I would still say then there's a guy, what's his name again? Uh Damn. There's a guy that's generally been available in the third round to some of the mock drafts that I've seen that are really, really like. Either way, take a shot in the draft. I don't think you need to risk it with a guy like McGovern, especially trying to switch positions suddenly. I We'll see how much the rest of the line really adjusts. I know we're kind of still keeping the Y zone run scheme and all that. But yeah, I don't think with the veteran guys, I want to experiment too much, right? Because then in that case, at least he kind of has the experience of being able to kind of do that. But then if you're going to do that, then you might as well say Mekhi Becton, pick a rookie tackle at 13, and then use Dwayne Brown to compete with Max Mitchell on the right side. A little different because Dwayne Brown's literally never done anything on the right tackle position. But I mean, yeah, the fact that we're not as youthful as we want to be on the offensive line, I think negates the opportunity to go out there and really try to find the versatility we're looking for, which I would say a lot of people are overkilling too. I don't really want a whole lot of versatility on the offensive line. I want my guys that I feel like could be all pros at their position. And then in case of an emergency, that's what your backup guys are for, right? So having a guy like Elijah Vera Tucker is a huge win in my opinion because looks like an all-pro guard. And then when shit hits the fan, you still look at him and say, all right, well, left guard, left tackle, right tackle, all are going to be solid locks. We're not going to be taking a huge hit. If we need to move him, and then you can just move a backup guard into his spot, like we've seen with Nate Herbig, and you don't have a supreme fall off. So I like the idea of kind of what's being mentioned. I just don't think it would make the most sense for us. Whoa. My bad. Oh, my phone's tripping a little bit. I think it's hotter out here than what I expected. Um, but yeah, I would be curious, by the way, Joe, what's your thoughts on what you see our team looking like for the division? I mentioned before, at least in terms of the odds that are out there in the sports betting world, we're right behind the Bills. I want to say I don't remember the numbers, so just take this with a grain of salt. I think the Bills were like plus 250 to win. The Jets were like plus 600. I think the Dolphins were 850, and then the Patriots are like plus 1,000. The point I'm making is that the Jets do not have a Super Bowl roster. Yeah, again, I can't really disagree. I think we're a strong playoff option. If we want to talk about can we be okay, so this season will actually be very good, right? So we're going back to kind of the scheduling. We face the Eagles and we face the Chiefs. Both of the teams in the most recent Super Bowl, both teams that had very strong rosters in different ways, right? Patrick Mahomes is the ace up the sleeve for the Chiefs. The Eagles had a monstrous defensive line, an excellent offensive line, a very versatile quarterback in Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown out there. I'm a big Miles Sanders fan, so there's a lot to love about their roster. Um, we face both of them this season, right? So the way I would look at it, and obviously every season's a little bit different, but if we can go out there and have a strong game against the Eagles and the Chiefs, that would go a long way to changing my mind. Right now, I think we can probably, at best, be an AFC championship contender. At worst, I'd say I want to say we'd make it to a division game, division championship game. I don't think we're a wild card team necessarily. And that is 100% based on us having Aaron Rodgers. Just made lateral moves at best. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm looking a lot of it for sure as the guys that are already coming back. And I wish I can say a third year into the scheme, but considering we grabbed Nathaniel Hackett and everybody that I hear talk about him, former players, coaching staff, personnel, stuff like that, everybody talks about how well he does at being able to match his scheme to his players' talents, which is something he didn't get to display in Denver, which I think is why a lot of people are kind of holding that over his head based on what it looked like on the field. In short summary, a huge clash between what Russell Wilson wanted to do versus what Nathaniel Hackett wanted to do, and then ownership kind of siding with, of course, their new shiny toy in Russell Wilson. So I'm not really concerned. I think you come back, you look at quarterbacks, quarterback room aside, you take a look at Brees Hall, you get excited for what he could do in this offense again. You look at Michael Carter, you say, okay, you've had one pretty good season. You've had one pretty bad season. Next year, what does that look like for him, right? And the areas you've seen him step back in is that he wasn't as elusive as he was previously. He went from never being stopped on first contact to if you brush shoulders with him, you can probably get him to hit the floor. So that a little bit more hesitation to hit the hole. I think those are things that you can try to clear up pretty quick. You don't just go from being an elusive person to suddenly being a stick in the mud. Um, I like the addition of Bam Knight. I would say the running back room, just by virtue of having another year in the NFL, has improved. Brees Hall, kind of a wash, but Michael Carter, I expect to come back and look like he did in his rookie year, if not better. Bam Knight, I'm excited for. I've not really been a fan of Ty Johnson, although he is effective. I'd rather take a look at the draft again. So the running back room, yeah, kind of a wash. The tight end room, I don't know how you can't expect better things there, right? Tyler Conklin had bad hands, still went over 600 yards, still had a lot of missed plays out there between Joe Flacco, Zach Wilson, basically the whole quarterback room. Mike White has some fault in a lot of what happened as well. He was just the most effective guy that we've seen. So I think a lot of the lateral moves that we're seeing are more so from the defensive side, which we were coming into this season after a certain point expecting Aaron Rodgers anyway. So we weren't going to go out there and be able to make a ton of upgrades. At some point, we have to be able to go out there and rely on our coaching staff and say, hey, these guys have actually shown that they can go out there and get some of these guys developed. Let's trust them to go and develop them. And that's what the good teams do, right? The Patriots are notorious for knowing when to move on, when to keep guys. And we're kind of just starting that whole phase of things ourselves. Brown, Tomlinson, and Conklin are the only offensive starters to play 9+ games. Did Brown get to 9 games? Damn, did he? He might have just hit 9 itself then. Tomlinson, yes. Conklin, yes. CJ is technically a starter. You have to throw him in there. He got stuck into an unfortunate blocking role because the line was crap, but he was essentially a starter. Running back room had quite a bit of rotation, so yeah. Garrett Wilson played all of his games. Um, I feel like I'm missing a bunch of people. Garrett played his games. Elijah Moore got tossed in and out. Then he had the suspension, so I don't think he hit 9. Denzel Mims didn't see playing time till Corey went out, and I don't believe he hit 9 either. And then you're missing a bunch of guys on the defense too. Don't need months to gel. Maybe some do. I think historically it's kind of proven that an offensive line needs more time than not. We also haven't had great off seasons where we've been able to keep our starting line together. Normally, at least 2 or 3 people are going down by the time we're trying to hit the preseason. So there's a lot of that as well. But again, I think a lot of that ultimately comes down to the center quarterback conversation as well too. The center is essentially the quarterback for the offensive line. If you don't have a guy that's not only a strong communicator, but a guy that can actually go out there and handle his duties as well, you're going to be bound to struggle for a while. I would hope not. I mean, we'll see. The way I look at it for sure is I have a lot of faith in us specifically becoming kind of like the old championship teams that we've seen in '09 and 2010, where we're relying on the run game. We bring in Keith Carter. He knows what a current top 5 rushing attack looks like and how to get there. And he's been able to show that with, not only different offensive line combinations, he's shown it without having to rely on a guy like Derrick Henry as well, which is a lot of what I hear a lot of other people try to fight me on. He had Derrick Henry. He's a freak. You're not going to be able to go out there and draft another guy like that. And I don't think that we need to. So yeah, I don't know. A lot of my faith is going to be purely based on what I think this new revamped offensive coaching staff could do. Because we haven't had a coaching staff with a lot of these accolades before. And when we have, at least at the time, I remember like Marty Mordenweg being a guy that people were happy about. But then you had like Rex Ryan that was, kind of superseding, I'm sure, some of what they wanted to do on offense and different things of that. Not being able to properly develop like Mark Sanchez and replenish the roster and all of these different things. With issues with Mike Tannenbaum giving up a ton of capital and stuff. I think we're still adjusting as fans. To be 100% honest, a lot of us are still stuck in either those championship days, or we're still stuck in the turmoil of having a poorly run front office, a clown circus for a coaching staff a lot of times, with internal fights or them fumbling over each other, or trying to make power moves, or simply just not being good at their jobs. So, you know, changes are upon us. The entire NFL is trying to find elite quarterbacks. Just need to go ground and pound with average quarterback play and best defense in football that will win a Super Bowl. I mean, defense wins championships, as they say, right? I The conversation when it comes to quarterbacks comes to me that, let's say, actually, this current season is a really good example for us as well. Our defense could have been probably historically elite, right? We definitely could get up there, but if we had an offense that was able to go out there and move the chains, give them a few more breathers, different things like that. If maybe we had a turnover guy on defense, you're looking at a much different roster, right? And we would have done that with below average quarterback play, a running game that fizzled out very early after Brees Hall went out, and then obviously a frustrated wide receiver group that just couldn't get acceptable passes sent their way. We almost made it to the playoffs purely off defense, so I'm already ecstatic about that. I think we got that on lock between what Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich have been able to develop. The problem comes that you're potentially going to have an off day, or you're going to have a time when you come up against an elite offense, guys that can blow plays up on any single down, and you have to be on your P's and Q's for the entire 60 minutes. You can't win that way when you have just an average quarterback. You need to have a guy that has some kind of trait that's going to separate him from the rest of the NFL, right? With Zach Wilson, he definitely had the arm strength. His calling card seems like it was also going to be the escapability, right? He can go out there, he can force guys to miss in ridiculous ways. And I want to say it was the play where he ran around for almost like 30 yards or something crazy, and then was able to still sling a pass down the field. You need some of those standout traits sometimes if you get into those dog fights, because you're going to be very limited what you can do offensively if you want to talk about just average quarterback play. If average quarterback play is all we needed, then we could run this season back with Chris Streveler. Rookie deal quarterback with the loaded roster is huge for a Super Bowl team. It's hard to build a roster with a $50 million quarterback. That's true. That's true. Nobody ever said it's not. But again, we're seeing a hell of a lot of teams go out there and still find success with $100 million quarterbacks that are making, 50 million plus for sure. So I don't know. I mean, that's what's going to happen if you want to win, right? Ultimately, if you go out there and you can get a Super Bowl and different things like that, you're going to have to pay the guys that helped you get there. And then you're going to have to, as a coaching staff, come together, get creative, and figure out what the next iteration of your offense and defenses are going to look like. Yeah, Mahomes is 100% the exception, but still, well, we're just starting to really see $50 million quarterbacks as well. So, I mean, Patrick Mahomes recently, Jalen Hurts, you've seen the Eagles do it with Nick Foles. Seen them kind of get there with Carson Wentz. You've seen Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. We've seen who else recently? Matthew Stafford, Joe Burrows of the world. Actually, to be fair, to your point, a lot of those guys are going to end up just hitting their second contracts in the NFL. So they've been lucky. We don't have that luxury, though. We kind of screwed that up when we threw Zach Wilson into the fire. Which is why, by the way, I will always be a huge fan of Robert Saleh, because the man pivots and he doesn't necessarily cry about it. So I think that's going to be one of the stronger traits we can ask for if we can see this coaching staff last. is once plan A goes out the window, it's not shut everything down and fold up and let's hope for the number one pick. They're going to try to find ways to work, and then we'll work on building off of that as we get into the off season. The Browns. What did I miss? Deshaun Watson. I got you. I got you. Yep. He'll probably come back and make a crap ton of noise next season, right? Obviously, coming back, he's had 2 years off. You would expect there to be some hiccups. Um, they go out there and add Elijah Moore. You still get Amari Cooper. Donovan Peoples-Jones is a good, chain mover. Huge catch radius. I love the backfield. I will always be a proponent of this. I think we should find a way to find our Nick Chubb. I think we should find a way to find our Nick Chubb Kareem Hunt combination duo. I was going to do so I did a mock draft just for the hell of it. Not live. I didn't do a video, any of that kind of stuff, but I was going to put out there what I did because I was just experimenting with what a roster could look like if we added a few more resources to the room. And I traded back to like the 20s, and I did have I ended up picking Bijan Robinson, and then I think we went DeJuan Jones. And then I'm pretty sure I picked up like Sidney Brown right after that. And this is recently since we have the two back-to-back picks in the second round. So I would love that combination. I think that would solve all the issues with trying to rush Breece Hall back as well. And even when he comes back, you literally are talking about looking at teams like the Browns as a blueprint for being able to go out there for two number one style running backs to go out there and have success on the same team. And you can do it for relatively cheap as well, the way the running backs get played out here. Luis, do you have Twitter? Awesome content. I appreciate that, my man. If you're new to the channel or checking me out, much appreciated. I'm not a social media guy. YouTube is essentially my social media. So I don't I don't do Twitter. I don't really do Instagram. I don't have a Facebook page for my YouTube or anything like that. So whenever you get the time, just stop back in. I'm trying to go live more often. Other than that, I definitely try to drop videos when I can for you guys. I would rather have offer number 3. Oh, I would rather offer 3 number ones plus for Herbert. 3. Oh, wait. You would drop 3 first-round picks for Justin Herbert? I think that's a little hyperbolic. Justin Herbert, I like a lot. To me, he's missing something, and this could be coaching. This could just be, the Chargers defense or something like that. Justin Herbert is missing something to me, kind of like, I think people would default to just calling it like the it factor. There's something to Justin Herbert's game, or at least the way that team is getting run, where he just can't push his team over the edge, right? If you want to even think about like the playoff loss that they just had, you should not lose to the Jacksonville Jaguars in that manner. Even if your defense starts failing, even if your coaching staff starts relying, 80% of the time on a running game, at that point, you as the quarterback, knowing what you can do, knowing what that offense looks like, you got to go out there and pull like a Quentin Williams almost and get in your coaching staff's face and say, I'm putting the game back on my back. We need to put the Jaguars in the coffin and end this whole ridiculousness. Instead, now you probably end up having a few issues in the future. I remember Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa? I think it's Joey. You have Joey Bosa that's, off on the sideline, like trying to literally collapse his helmet into each other because he's so pissed. So, yeah, I like everything that he offers, but there's still something missing just based on what I've seen. And I'm not tuning into him every week or anything, but there's just something missing there to make sure that his team is like a consistent playoff winner. I think he can get you to the playoffs pretty easily, but that playoff mentality is kind of something different. He needs that Mamba juice in him. Yeah, facts. Facts are facts. I it, Patrick Mahomes is the only guy that you'd be able to talk me into saying is worth like multiple first round picks. And I think the Chiefs, Andy Reid, the rest of the NFL, everybody understands he might be one of the last few players that will finish his entire career with that one organization. I don't see them allowing him to go anywhere ever. In a second, they can't afford him. Herbert is missing a supporting cast. That, I can't agree with that one. He had Mike Williams. He had the names are escaping me today, y'all. Forgive me. Mike Williams, you have damn it, and I really love him too, because I used to watch him a lot when I was playing in school. You have what is his name? I love his route running, but the man can never stay on the field. Damn it. Ah, yeah, that's tough. I can't think of his name right now. It's like right there on the tip of my tongue. Either way, though, he's had two strong wide receiver options. I don't remember who they actually have coming out of the slot. Um, I don't remember who the Chargers even have at tight end, matter of fact. But still, I like the running back room. They had Austin Eckler back there. One or two other guys that were able to come in once Eckler has some issues because he can't stay healthy either. I think with the Chargers offense, realistically, you're saying that, they even fix up the offensive line. You can say that injuries have kind of been their downfall, but they haven't had them in heaps and bunches. So when you look at them, I just see a team that can't get over the hump. They're having a mental roadblock of not being able to put opponents away, simply. Um, I think Herbert definitely has one of the better casts of any of the other quarterbacks that have come out recently. And the Chargers have been committed to continuing to invest resources on the offense for them. So it's not even like we got Justin Herbert, so leave it and forget it type situation now. Arlen, my man, appreciate you coming in. I see you pull up whenever possible. Harlan is on almost like every Jets YouTuber's stream or videos that I can think of. My man is a hell of a committed fan. Luis, sounds good. What do you think about Woody Johnson speaking on the most recent Aaron Rodgers news? Shout out to you, bro. I'm born and raised in the Bronx, Bermuda, Seattle, 8 years. Shout out from the West Coast. Hey, I got you. So, yeah, I'm from Jersey originally myself, hence being a Jets fan. And I've been out in Las Vegas for quite some time. So it's been hard to catch the games, but, I do what I could do. Um, we talked about it a little bit earlier on in the stream as people were coming in. I think Woody Johnson, to kind of recap for you real quick, I think he backed himself into a corner. I think he overrode the decision that Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh wanted Derek Carr. He ultimately moved on once he understood that the deal probably wasn't going to happen until something with Aaron Rodgers did. And he didn't want to lose out on a prime opportunity. So once we lost Derek Carr, it was pretty much, Derek Carr was the number one B option. Aaron Rodgers is 1A. I don't think we really gave a ton of serious attention to anybody else. Once Derek Carr left, I think things were 100% Aaron Rodgers or bust. And now that we backed ourselves into a corner, he's kind of getting cold feet after. And again, I don't know why this is coming up recently because the Pat McAfee show stuff happened, like a month ago. But now he's suddenly getting cold feet. Has he overly committed or overly invested in telling Joe Douglas by any means necessary get Aaron Rodgers in here so we can try to win a Super Bowl? And now he's realizing that it really might be a one-hit wonder. Once again, he's literally reliving the whole Brett Favre situation. This time, we're just not being used to get to another team. Um, I think he's getting a little bit of cold feet, right? And then you talk about as well a lot of what's happening, my man. Appreciate you chopping in, Nathan. On top of that, you add in kind of what's been happening in free agency. You know, me and Joe were talking about in the chat a little bit. We Until the Aaron Rodgers thing got figured out, we weren't going to go out there and be aggressive and make a ton of moves to 100% improve the roster anyways. But when you're waiting on Aaron Rodgers to be the forefront of your decision and then see how the rest of the chips fall, you have in the midst of all that, you have these free agents that could have helped improve the roster to a degree. You think about Odell Beckham Jr., you think about like Quan Alexander sitting out, you think about Kalai Campbell that's leaving, and these guys that are getting these contracts before they even hit the Jets for some of these meetings that are scheduled. For one, and Gunny said this during our podcast, I think that shows that the rest of the NFL is scared about teams coming in, seeing what's being built, and wanting to be a part of that. But two, from Woody Johnson's perspective, and you have to keep in mind he's pretty tunnel visioned, pretty narrow minded when it comes to like a football perspective. He's seeing free agents that could have come in and maybe help secure what he thinks is going to be a Super Bowl season for us. He's seeing them go elsewhere. And then you talk about, the media perspective and maybe what the fans are saying about this Aaron Rodgers situations. And, it seems like publicly, maybe a lot of the leverage conversations are leaning towards the Packers. I could see him getting cold feet and getting spooked by that and being like, okay, now we're going from get Aaron Rodgers by any means necessary to let's try to find the best bargain deal that we can get. Um, I don't know. I'm really over it, to be honest. I'm not a guy that loves spending a ton of conversation on our quarterback situation, at least until we start finding some success with the guy that we drafted ourselves. I really hate the idea of having to buy somebody else's gold. But yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at on the whole situation. How about you, Zoma? He played a lot and is a better pass catcher too. I like CJ. I did think that he was not going to be like a I didn't consider CJ to be a huge difference maker for us as an offense, right? His best season, we're talking about him doing, I think, maybe about 600 yards. I seen him more so as being an underrated red zone threat, and then just a guy that's really good within the scheme of what we want to do, which is yards after the catch. He makes guys miss. He makes guys not want to necessarily have to tackle them with his aggressiveness, with trying to get to the end zone. And I like that about him. So I'm really hoping this year, if we don't have to use him as basically a sixth offensive tackle again, I think you see what we saw towards the later stages of the season, where he was definitely a lot more of an impact player for us. Dark Soldier, glad to see you in here as well, my boy. The guarantee first is a no-go without a guarantee beyond this year. Yeah, I'm not actually a fan of us just outright giving any picks. In the grand scheme of what he's done in the NFL, and if you want to talk about like maybe how you respectfully go about trying to attract veteran talent in the NFL and things like that, I would say it's probably a little bit of a lowball offer to not at least outright provide a pick, which is why I'm comfortable giving up our second this year. But anything outside of that, I think definitely needs to have conditions tied to it, because nothing about the way his contract is set up or about his mental thought process lets you think that the man 100% wants to be in the NFL. This season is really about just proving the Packers wrong, and trying to spite them. And then, of course, adding a Super Bowl to his resume is great. You're not going to have, if I'm looking at Aaron Rodgers, I don't think he's a guy where that lasts for 2 seasons, right? The only way I see him coming back on is if he looks at that roster again and he says, okay, this is a team that can run it back, and maybe I can get a third one as well. And I think he'd have to believe that 100% in order to see him playing once again. Uh, did I miss anything else? Nah. Cool. All right. I will be wrapping it up pretty shortly. I got to go back in and do some more work that I don't want to do. But it's been dope chopping it up with y'all. So I'll leave it there again for some of you guys that are just being able to like pop in and stuff. As far as the New York Jets being Super Bowl contenders, where are you at with the whole thing? We highlighted it a little bit in terms of the NFL sports betting world. Um, for Super Bowl odds, we're ranked sixth right now. To win the AFC as a whole, we are ranked fourth. We have the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Bengals ahead of us. And then we're second in our own division to win the AFC East behind the Bills. I'm exhausted with the whole trade debacle. Last year was nothing but draft picks. Now it's nothing but the trade. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. As Jets fans, I think we'll always find that one thing that just needs to be a consistent topic of conversation for us. But yeah, I'm with you. As mentioned, I hate talking about quarterbacks if it's not going to be somebody that we've developed and seen success with anyway. So go figure. Harlan, I think as far as the I think as far as maybe what he's saying, and I won't put words in his mouth, but yeah, I don't think it's more so about being worried. I think it's just we don't need to talk about it until it's secured. Then you can, then we can have all our inputs and our fun opinions and all that kind of stuff. But until, ink hits paper for me, I'm really over it because there's nothing else to really talk about. We've broken down Aaron Rodgers' entire career. We've talked about to death how he fits with Nathaniel Hackett, and the concerns about, while he did have his MVP seasons with Nathaniel Hackett, he didn't call plays. So we've beaten that conversation to death. We've talked about mentality, where he's at, how committed he is. If we'll see 2 years out of him. So it's literally like, what else are we going to be able to go out there and mention about Aaron Rodgers, right? There's not going to be anything really truly new or anything like that to talk about until May, probably. Once we can actually get the trade confirmed, people will talk about that. We'll probably have two things, right? What does his restructured contract look like? And what did that do for the Jets? And then the second thing will be, when does he actually show up to the offseason? Because from what I remember seeing on a report, he told the Jets he doesn't expect to come until May. And then just historically, the last couple of years, I think since 2018, he just doesn't really participate in the offseason. He lets that time go to the young guys. Maybe that was a part of maybe that was a symptom of Jordan Love being in the building, but who knows? Can't call it. Hey, what's going on, Sports Talk? Appreciate you dropping in. We're actually getting ready to wrap it up pretty soon because I'm gonna either have to start taking my lunch to the car with me, or I'll I'll wrap these up in like 40 to 45 minutes so I can still run and hit lunch. 90% retired, 40 years old, maybe 1 year, not worth it for it. Yeah. Facts. Aaron Rodgers said he wants to play for the Jets. Just relax. Jets may see 3 or more years from Rodgers. That is a huge stretch. I look, and I'll leave it at this because Dark Soldier recapped it beautifully. If you take a look at what has been your job for, about 20 years, and you say, okay, I'm finally ready to be done with this. I want to chill. I'm going to get my retirement checks. I know I'm going to be in the Hall of Fame. I'm going to get all my accolades and all that kind of stuff. A simple thing like let's keep this from a job standpoint. The company that took a chance and hired you wants to finally move on from you. They've enjoyed your expertise. You've helped, train the person that's going to take over your role. They're ready to see them fulfill it. The simple fact that they are moving on from you to go to this younger guy, I don't see lasting for 3 years. And I don't see a rejuvenated Aaron Rodgers suddenly coming back and saying, hey, playing the 40 actually sounds fantastic to me. And I'm going to make that happen with the Jets. Pissed off Rodgers definitely makes us Super Bowl contenders when below average and not bottom of the barrel play would have got us to the playoffs with our defense and not shit. Facts. Oh my God. Hey, moving on from Braden Man was almost like a breath of fresh air. And to be fair, we don't talk about punters and stuff a whole lot, but I actually really like Braden Mann. I love seeing him go out there and put the hit on people at at what is he, like 5'11", 198 pounds. I love seeing him go out there and thump people when he got the chance. Um yeah, but last year was kind of the icing on the cake. If How do you allow 75% of the entire NFL's special team return touchdowns off terrible decisions is beyond me. But that's the world we live in. Winning is contagious. If the Jets are winning, Rodgers may want to stay. Yeah, but football is different from any of the stuff like basketball or baseball or anything like that. It's literally taxing on you every single play. Every single practice. It doesn't really matter how much you rest. You feel those 20 years immediately. So for me, let's say he even does stay on, I get very concerned about the prospects of him being able to go out there and really withstand an entire 3 years. Again, two is kind of the ideal scenario because I think the game plan as well, if Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas really are lying and they are 100% committed to trying to really develop Zach Wilson, you don't want to see Aaron Rodgers here for 3 years because then Zach Wilson, if we choose to get his fifth-year contract picked up so we can get an extra year of evaluation, you have no time to really compare anything. You get to see the practices and what Zach Wilson's been doing and maybe get player inputs like Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall and, some of those guys that should still be around. Um, but then that's it. That's it. You don't get any true on-field performance. You don't see him in any tough situations. And so, for me personally, if Aaron Rodgers is going to stay, do your 2 years, give us our Super Bowl, move on. We'll call it a day. I think 2 years, nothing more, nothing less. Yeah, I'm cool with the 1 year, to be honest. If it gives us a Super Bowl, great. If not, then it was all a waste, anyways. Um, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it. I don't want to have to talk about Aaron Rodgers again until we get the trade announced and we hear what he negotiated his contract to, which I don't remember. I feel like it's a redundant question, but I wonder when we say that Aaron Rodgers needs to restructure his contract, if that means that he can take a pay cut or if we're really just shifting the money around on his contract. Because it'll be different to me if he comes, we restructure some money, push things around, and we'll just take on the cap hits and maybe lower numbers or something like that later on. Um, but it'll be completely different in my mind if not only does he come over via the trade, but then he takes a pay cut so that we open up a few more bucks to make maybe some last minute moves before the season kicks off. I think that is a game changer. But yeah, let me chop it up with you guys while I'm on the way back into the office. The one perk about the one perk about this job is not a ton of questions. I love it. Yeah, 3 years is tough, but I wonder who said that. Was that Harlan or was that coming from Joe? I don't remember who said it. It sounds a little bit like trolling to me. If we win the Super Bowl, let's toast with a cup of Henny. You trying to get crazy, crazy. Henny in February, huh? I guess it's a bad time to say I don't drink. I'll toast it to you, though. I'm sure I could find somebody in the house who'll take the cup. Well, while I'm on my way in, I appreciate you guys stopping in. I'm going to try to fit this into my schedule on Tuesdays and Thursdays from now on. Monday, we have the Jets Flight Squad podcast that I do during lunch, so I wouldn't do it then, but we'll still have a live stream. Um, but yeah, I think Tuesdays and Thursdays is what we're looking at, just so I can kind of get a little bit more adjusted to this. And then I'm pretty sure I'm going to try to squeeze in my final mock draft in like the next week or so. I think this weekend is busy, but appreciate you guys dropping in. I'm gonna catch you guys again, and I appreciate all the love. Peace.